After a string of unpopular movies in the late 80s and early 90s, some folks were claiming Sylvester Stallone's career to be over. That is until the 1993 blockbuster Cliffhanger completely revived him. Kind of funny how that works in Hollywood. Put out a few stinkers and everyone's calling for your head. Then release a crowd pleaser and everyone loves you again. When Cliffhanger was hitting theaters, Stallone was still working on his next film, Demolition Man. Originally, the movie was meant to pit action heroes Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal against one another. Both of them declined because neither one of them wanted to play the bad guy. The first draft of the script was written by Daniel Waters, who wrote the brilliant teen satire, Heathers. It was written as a lampooning of action films, a satire that was taking the piss out of those machismo-filled movies. Not entirely happy with the script, the studio handed it off to other writers. As it passed from writer to writer, it had a satire removed and then inserted back in again numerous times. Some drafts were more serious, some were more silly, but both seemed to miss the point of the original script. Producer Joel Silver stepped in, hired a new writer, and was able to get a script that struck the perfect balance of action and comedy. Italian director Marco Brambilla was brought in to direct. This would be his first film. With the humor back in the script, the studio wanted to bring in Sylvester Stallone. While he was known mostly for action movies, his comedies failed. However, they saw the potential in melding the two for the foundation of Demolition Man. Stallone wanted to hire Jackie Chan as Simon Phoenix, but Chan turned it down, not wanting to play a villain. Silver wanted Wesley Snipes for the part, but he had no interest. He flew out to the set of Rising Sun, where Snipes was working alongside Sean Connery, and convinced him to play the role. For the film's secret villain, they hired classic actor Nigel Hawthorne. Hawthorne wasn't particularly enthused about doing the movie. He was doing it simply to help get funding for his next film, The Madness of King George, which got him an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. While the concept of the film was a satire on action movies of the 80s, it was also poking fun at a future where PC culture was allowed to run unchecked. With a roughly $50 million budget and a very tight schedule, they set off to make the film. The movie was set to start in the not-so-distant future of 1996. Los Angeles had become a demilitarized zone and was in complete chaos. They shot this right after the LA riots, which influenced the look of the demilitarized LA. They even included actual photos of the riots in the Hall of Violence. They wanted the movie to have a big badass opening, so they started it with Stallone bungee jumping off a twin-rotor helicopter. The downdraft of the rotor blades created 120-mile-an-hour winds. They had to bolt pieces of the set down to make sure they didn't fly off and kill someone. At one point, the helicopter got too close to a camera crew and sent them flying. In 1992, Silver produced Lethal Weapon 3. In the film, there was a huge explosion when they blew up the old city hall. The building was scheduled for detonation, so the film crew worked with the city in order to allow them to film it for the movie. In Demolition Man, they discovered there was an old government water and power building that was out of commission. They spoke with the local officials, and this time, they were able to hire their own detonation team to design the explosion to be much more dynamic. The movie was shot mostly around Orange County, California, and at the WB Studios in Burbank. Some of the backgrounds were matte paintings. The movie was influenced by the novel Brave New World. Brave New World's about a future where everything you do is predetermined, so you won't offend anyone. Lenina Huxley's name is a combination of Lenina Crown, a character in Brave New World, and Aldous Huxley, the author. For the character, they originally cast Lori Petty. The first day on the set, they were filming the not sex scene, and the director immediately knew that she wasn't right for the role. They let her go and hired a then unknown Sandra Bullock. The cryo prison was the most expensive set, so they shot as many scenes there as possible to justify the cost. The fluid being poured on Stallone was glycerin. The concept for the cryogenics in the movie was taken from the Kurt Vonnegut novel Cat's Cradle. In the book, there was a substance called Ice-9, a seed crystal that would immediately freeze any water it came into contact with. For the opening sequence, the frozen Stallone is a body mold of the actor. They propped the dummy in the air, filled the room with smoke, and flew a camera around it, which gave the appearance of him being in ice. They had a partnership with GM, who provided them with 18 concept cars, called the Ultralights. They made another 20 replicas to be used as stunt vehicles, and ones that were destroyed. The cars were constantly breaking down, so for many of the driving sequences, they filmed the background plates in Orange County and ran them on rear projectors as the actors did their scenes in the cars. Part of the GM deal also netted them this classic car, a 1970 Oldsmobile 442. The costumes for the civilians were designed to cover as much skin as possible, because in the future the ozone layer was depleted. The police station was designed to look like a combination of a library, a department store, and an air traffic control tower. They developed the computers to be what they thought interfaces in the future would look like. With all the touchscreen stuff, they weren't that far off. Both Stallone and Snipes did many of their own stunts. Much like Bruce Lee, Snipes' karate moves were so fast, the camera had a hard time picking them up. In order to get them to film properly, they had to ask him to move slower. When Stallone was first released from the cryo prison, they jokingly called this the birth of Venus. When Stallone and Snipes fall into the underground set, they purposefully designed this to have as many action cliches as possible. Crates, boxes, rundown cars, plenty of cover, and everything explodes. The projectiles fired from the supergun were optical effects. Being that this was 1993, there were almost no computer effects. The post Snipes beat Stallone with was made out of plastic. An ongoing gag of the film was that Taco Bell was the restaurant that won the franchise wars, so all restaurants were now Taco Bells. They spoke to many different chains, and Taco Bell was one of the few that didn't mind being showcased in an R-rated movie. They even helped them design the mariachi outfits the waiters wore. Since Taco Bell wasn't widely available outside the US, for the international cut of the film, they changed Taco Bell to Pizza Hut.
Your tone is quasi-facetious, but you do not realize that Taco Bell was the only restaurant to survive the franchise wars.
So?
So? Now all restaurants are Taco Bell.
Your tone is quasi-facetious, but you do not realize that Pizza Hut was the only restaurant to survive the franchise wars.
So?
So? Now all restaurants are Pizza Hut.
The Taco Bell building was Hughes Aircraft in El Segundo, California. Some scenes were shot in the new Los Angeles Convention Center, which was just built but wasn't open to the public yet. They were the first of many films to shoot there. The car chase was filmed on the Imperial Highway in El Segundo. It was still under construction at the time, so they didn't have to worry about closing it for filming. When Stallone's being shoved on the road's actually a rolling carpet with a road texture on it. The freedom fighters from the underground were called Scraps. Stallone's personal trainer was one of them. Much like Waterworld and other 90s movies, Jack Black from out of nowhere. Jesse Ventura had a small role as one of Snipes' henchmen. The nude chat girl was actress and Penthouse Pet of the Year 1992, Brandy Ledford. Stallone thought Rob Schneider was funny and insisted on hiring him for Judge Dredd in 1995. It's rumored basketball player Dennis Rodman was inspired to start dyeing his hair because of Simon Phoenix. In Huxley's office, there's a Lethal Weapon 3 poster. Steve Kahan is the captain in 1996 Demolition Man and the police captain in the Lethal Weapon series. The character of Edgar Friendly was completely rewritten for Dennis Leary when he was cast. Glenn Shaddix was hired essentially to reprise his role from Beetlejuice. The Scraps wardrobe was made up of car parts, debris, and anything else they think would have been discarded in the ruins underneath the city. Sandra Bullock's dress in the Taco Bell scene was made up of rocks and weighed over 40 pounds. At one point, the weight of the dress caused it to rip, which is why she has her arms like this. It's to keep the dress together. In the beginning of the film, Snipes says,
I swear, I'd lose my head if it wasn't attached.
Which is foreshadowing to the end where he gets his head knocked off. The head was made out of resin and dipped in liquid nitrogen, which is what made it so brittle it exploded on impact. The film wrapped, but due to some of the effects, they went slightly over budget, and the film ended up costing about $57 million. Warner Brothers didn't like the first cut of the film, so they took out a good chunk of the violence and some of the extended scenes. They removed a part where Snipes cuts out the warden's eye. Now we don't see that, we just see the aftermath. They also removed a scene where Snipes guns down a room full of guards. They cut out a scene where Phoenix kills Zachary Lamb. They removed a fight between Stallone and Jesse Ventura. The biggest thing they cut out was a subplot where Stallone meets his daughter in the future as one of the Scraps. In one of the earlier drafts, Lenina Huxley was supposed to be his daughter. That would have been weird. Fred Decker's uncredited, but he was brought in to punch up some of the dialogue in the script. He also was the reason why they had the big opening in 1996. The movie was released in October of 1993 and was a hit, pulling in close to $160 million worldwide. Even though the movie was edited down, the director was happy with the result. He was proud of how the shorter cut helped to accentuate the humor and prove that Stallone did have some comedic chops. They launched a toy line to go along with the movie, which was just repainted figures from the New Adventures of He-Man. The film was a hit, but for some reason, Brambilla didn't direct again until 1997 with the Alicia Silverstone movie, Excess Baggage. Even though Cliffhanger saved Stallone's career, I feel Demolition Man's the one that holds up better. Cliffhanger's a fun action movie, but Demolition Man is a fun action movie, plus a hilarious satire goofing on both action movies and PC culture. The name of the movie comes from the song Demolition Man. Originally it was written by Sting, but performed by Grace Jones in 1981. Sting liked her rendition so much, he did his own version with the Police on a later album. He re-recorded the song solo for the soundtrack of the film. This movie is a classic and one of my favorites from Stallone. While most critics at the time hated the movie, it was enjoyed by the general public. There was talk of a sequel and possible prequel, but neither happened and it's too late to do one now. Most likely at this point, they just reboot it. The movie also foretold a lot of things. Self-driving cars, tablet computers, full-screen video chat, teleconferencing, and more. Demolition Man is a rarity, a smarter-than-expected action comedy that has just as much bite now as it did back in 1993. Perhaps more. We never did get a sequel, but at least we finally found out how those 3 seashells work.
Honestly, look, this isn't the Wild West, okay? The Wild West wasn't even the Wild West. Hurting people's not a good thing. Well, sometimes it is, but not when it's a bunch of people looking for something to eat.